when we do go through transitions, really I realized that it can become very empowering. And usually the struggles that you go through during transitions, they can literally help empower you to, your true life's purpose. What's up? What's up? What's up? Welcome to the AlignUs podcast, a transformative journey into the world of wellness and philanthropy. I'm your host, Dr. Nikhil Sharma, and I'm so grateful to have you guys here with us today. All right, let's get started. On today's topic, we are going to be discussing life transitions. And our special guest today is Dala Hemeyer, who is a licensed psychotherapist turned mindset mentor. I love that. Welcome to the AlignUs podcast, Dala. And I am grateful to have you here with us today.
I'm so grateful you've invited me. I'm really thrilled to be here.
All right. Now, before we get into the podcast, can you give us a little bit of a background about, how you got to be a mindset mentor? Because I really love that title. And, your journey seems very unique, and would love to hear a little bit about your background.
Yeah, I'll try to keep things short because I can be I can be kind of chatty. Gosh, as a little bitty kid, I always wanted to be a helper. My mom was a nurse. I thought I was going to be a nurse. And as I started to explore that area, I realized I have like a legitimate issue with blood, like it makes me faint. So I was like, okay, can't go into like the physical health side of things. So I started to explore the mental wellness side of things. And so I ended up becoming a therapist, and I worked 15, 16 years in kind of the traditional like organizations and clinics doing therapy with primarily people who were dealing with post-traumatic stress disorder and clinical depression and like really, really serious anxiety related stuff. And kind of found my home there. Honestly, the last place I worked, I said, I like will retire from this seat. I didn't think I'd ever leave. I was really, really happy there. And then I experienced a huge life transition in 2020, not the normal one that everybody, not the typical one that everybody experienced during that time, but it was a family one. We welcomed a new baby that wasn't exactly, we weren't exactly expecting him. And then we also had a very significant health issue come up in our close family that pushed me to have to kind of look at what was really, really important to me. And I had to kind of decide between this like career path and this family path, which were both like high importance. But I ended up leaning more towards the family side. And so I moved home out of the traditional role, started a private practice, which I still have. But on the side and through this sort of transition, I realized how much I loved working with people through transitions. Like my private practice has started to really gain a lot of people who are going through some kind of big life change. And yeah, that's kind of how I came here. I love that transition side of life, even though it's so stressful.
It is. And, when we do go through transitions, it's really, I realized that it can become very empowering. And usually the struggles that you go through during transitions, they can literally help empower you to, your true life's purpose, a lot of the times, as you're kind of mentioning what some of the struggles that you are going through. And I feel like nothing really happens by coincidence. And it's just up to us to recognize and be aware of, hey, what's really happening here. And it gives us a time to pause and reflect and then journey forward through that transition. And usually something beautiful comes out of that.
I have to like totally agree with you. It almost brings tears to my eyes because when I think about that time when we were trying to we were making this as a family, this choice, but it was incredibly stressful. One of the most stressful times of our entire lives. And at the same time, the way that we were making decisions brought us so much contentment and peace. And even though like there are days where I'm like, wow, this is really hard, the whole part-time mom, part-time working, full-time everything actually. And there are things about it that I don't always love. At the very core of me, I always feel like there's this like satisfaction. And that's what I tend to hear at the end of working with my clients too, is, oh, life isn't easy. I'd come to you hoping to find like easy ways to make life happen, but that's not necessarily what I've achieved, but I have achieved a more satisfying life.
I really agree with you there, and I agree with a lot of patients or a lot of people's initial sentiment that, hey, we initially think that life is linear, and I literally thought my life was that way. I, had grown up in a good family house, and I went through high school, college, went to medical school, and then I graduated residency, and then I became the chief resident. And then, I'm so excited, like life is progressing. I'm just turning 30 years old, and boom, my mom got diagnosed with cancer, and unfortunately it was terminal cancer. Then boom, a couple of months later, my dad fell into a severe depression that caused him to be in very poor mental health. And so my trajectory of where life I thought was headed, all of a sudden, took a turn, and it was a big left turn. And, I was just, taken back by that, because again, it's the assumption that when I was growing up, that life, is linear, and it's just compounding one thing, the other, and you're not really fully adept to cope sometimes with major life events and life transitions, especially for me in that situation. I was going from being, having two parents, to losing one, and then the other one, foundation was kind of gone. So it was kind of like I was on my own all of a sudden. So, but, through that process and through, learning more about myself, I started to, eventually develop an authenticity that was created and rooted in values and character strengths. And recently I had made another major transition in my life, where I've gone from being a physician in the hospital, where I was taking care of a lot of people who were dealing with liver failure and having get them to transplants, but to now owning a tech company that is based and rooted on making donating fun, easy, and rewarding for everyone. So that is a huge transition that I've kind of undergone, and it was not easy. I mean, it was certainly turbulent. I personally can vouch that I did not cope with the transitions, nor did I plan properly on how to make that. I just knew that I wanted to, like, my energy had gone from, being a physician to really loving starting this app and developing this company that I knew was going to help people mentally, as I spent a lot of time helping them physically. I just knew I wanted to get there. But I just thought I had to get there fast. How it was going to work out. Yeah, exactly. Right. And so that's, and I feel like these transitions can be very difficult, as we know, but they can be catastrophic, because I was burnt out in that transition, and I did not handle that well. And so I'm so glad that you're here with us today to kind of help our viewers and our listeners out there, how can they begin to start making life's transitions a little bit easier on themselves?
Yeah. So, it always helps if you've done some of this preparation ahead of time, but it's not necessary. It's not 100% necessary. If we're going to talk about an easier way, preparing ahead of time is the easier way, but it's certainly something you can do when it's happening. And that really is, as you just mentioned, that self-discovery of your core values and your character strengths. The core values is the piece that I really focus on with my with my clients, and that is just really understanding the core values is the foundation of what drives every decision in your life. Sometimes we're very, very aware of what they are and how the decisions come together. Other times they're just working in the background, and if if we can, as we're going through transitions, keep in mind those core values, we really won't be steered wrong because of that empowerment piece that like it just makes you so much more I don't know if braver is the right word, but just like mentally and emotionally stronger to like make the hard decisions. Because the easy decisions aren't difficult to make, right? But they do help you when the hard decisions are really what's kind of present.
Right. I agree, because a lot of times I had this false pretense that I had this strong foundation of like who I was. And although growing up, I did have a good, strong foundation. However, as we grow, our values change.
Yeah.
Right. And we don't really reevaluate those values. A lot has happened in our life that we don't realize, and we have changed, but it's like a subconscious change that's occurred. And we haven't fully, a lot of times, aligned ourselves with who we are on the inside and who we are on the outside. Sometimes we're at this very superficial level, but although inside we have these values that we believe in, but a lot of times we don't actually list those values out or reaffirm them to ourselves. Like, hey, I used to value, hanging out with a certain friend group, all the time. That would be my first value. But then now I really value spending time with my family, as I've gotten older, and so,
Yeah.
so those things shift. Right.
Yeah.
And so do you recommend, individuals to sit down and then go over, like, how would they go over their values and
Yeah,
establish what they are?
absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I 100% feel like people should sit down and sort of write a list of 5 or 10. Keep it simple. But yeah, if we aren't really pretty aware of what we actually value, then we will pick up on the values that like society or our families or our friend groups are telling us is important, whoever our biggest influences. And that's not necessarily bad. I'm not saying that those influences have bad intentions for us or are wrong. Oftentimes, some of those influences are very helpful and we do adopt them. But if we aren't checking in with just us as well and going, what do I think and only I think, we'll find ourselves getting out of alignment. There's like this rub that we'll feel. The big one that I oftentimes see is I get a lot of like just coming out of college clients, and they're like, okay, I did what I've been told to do. I went to high school, I went to college, I got my master's, I did my internship, I graduated with honors. And now I'm not like, well, now what? They're kind of like untethered, or they feel unsatisfied. They're even kind of looking back on their degree going, this is not what I thought I wanted. Or they hit like 40 and they've spent all of this time in a career and they're going, yikes, for a while, this is exactly what I wanted, but this isn't anymore. And I feel really, really lost. And as they sit down and start to list out their core values, they go, oh, now I kind of know who I am and what I want more of.
Right. And I think that a lot of these values, like you said, they have been implemented by our family members, our parents, our grandparents, their grandparents. It has been passed down that, what, these are our values and we must stick to these values. I know I grew up in an Indian household, and our values were that, education came first over everything. And, almost like the love that I got was based on my academic achievements. Right. And so we also discussed that, values of, having to marry, someone that's of Indian background, or, just these outdated beliefs, but, just being real about like how the conversations happen. But as I grew up, I realized that, what, like, yes, education is important, but, it's not everything that life encounters. It's not everything that life has to offer. There's more to life than just education, and then it's not necessarily that, oh, I have to marry a person of Indian origin, because people of every type and religion are all fascinating, and I love getting to know everybody. So it's just about when that awakening occurs for you that, hey,
Yeah.
what your parents and family and society wants or deems normal isn't
Yeah.
normal for you, it's a very beautiful thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that word, that awakening. That's
Yeah.
such a more like powerful word than like some people use like crisis or like identity crisis or midlife crisis. And I love the term awakening. That's so much more empowering. It just gives you, it puts you in the seat of like decision. You're the driver now. You're deciding what to do, not reacting.
Right. And a part of that awakening to yourself is finding out like, hey, who is Nikhil Sharma? What are his values?
Mhm.
You're right. And yeah, like when you get that understanding, you're able to move forward in a empowering type of way. And you're able to handle life's transitions a lot easier,
Yeah.
during that with
Yeah.
those in hand.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And so I know values is definitely a big part of transitions, but I
Mhm.
feel the other major part about doing life transitions is connection.
Mhm.
I feel a lot oftentimes when we are going through major life transitions, whether it's jobs, whether it's divorces, whether it's marriages, whether it's having one kid, your second kid, your kid going to college, right? Life is just full of transitions. However, we have been trained in a way to think that, especially the more very difficult transitions, that we need to handle those transitions on our own,
Alone. Yeah.
and that's the last thing that we should be doing, right? Like connection is so important to help aid us to get to that promised land, to help take that leap of faith. Growing up, or back in the day when there was cavemen, they weren't allowing their little children to just roam around the herd by themselves. Everything was done in community.
Mhm.
Why? Because there's such a major, powerful impact that occurs when you do things together. It's done cohesively and with love, with support, because it's scary to go out on your own. It's scary to do transitions.
Yeah, and the science out there really supports the need for connection. They talk about, I mean, like there's science with as far as connection at work, connection within families, connection within your social circle and your community. You just like the research is strong. You're not going to find research that says, no, do it alone. And yet that's like a lot of our messaging, right? Kind of from
Right.
the outside world in is like, you're only strong if you can conquer all on your own. But very rarely is anyone doing anything alone. And there's lots of ways to get connected. Takes some effort sometimes, but there are lots of ways.
Right. How would you suggest? Because a lot of times, again, we have this built-in fear to ask for help.
Yeah.
We will help anybody out there. I mean, I will help my friends, even acquaintances. I will go out of my way to do something for them. But when it comes time for me to ask for help, I'm like, no, I can do it. I can do it. I can do everything on my own. I'm Superman, and I am. Don't get me wrong. We are all superheroes, right? Like I truly believe we all have superhuman power. Each one of us individually that's been brought here to conquer something that they're meant to, but it doesn't mean that happens on your own. We need to be able to ask for help. So how would you go about telling one of your patients like who they should reach out to or how they should go about getting that help, whether it's with a
Yeah.
therapist or family?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I just want to thank you for like saying that about yourself, because the more we like start to share with other people, like, hey, it is hard for me to ask for help, but it's also okay, and I've learned how to do it, and it's important. The more that encourages other people, because again, the message is I'm doing it all alone, like the general message, the big loud one, right? So the more that we say it differently, the more likely people are to do it. But there's lots of ways you can do. You can kind of go on the individual route. I mean, I certainly have had a number of clients in the therapy world who have come, and that's what we kind of work on, is sort of that internal fear of I have to do it alone, I can't ask for help, and how to get past that. So if it's really like, if it's coming down to it's more than I just don't want to, or I feel uncomfortable, like there's a serious barrier, then I would say go to therapy. But there's also lots of self-help coaches that are there to kind of help you take on your own personal stuff. It's certainly not a bad idea to like get involved in an online community that that can start to help you at least start to like say the words or feel the feelings of, hey, I'm struggling here and I need help. It also helps to hear or know that you're not the only one out there. And then you just start to kind of look around in your life and you start to identify, okay, who else kind of thinks like me? Who else do I think probably has similar values that I do? And those are the people that you start to connect with first and foremost, because you know they're already going to be kind of on the same level as you.
Yeah, I really love that. I love the idea of connecting with an online community. I think, certainly it's free. And then on top of
Yeah.
that, you realize that you're not the only person out there that's going through the same thing as you are, which is really exciting in a way because it makes you not feel like you're not alone,
Oh,
and when you're
isolated.
part of, yeah, isolated, you're not alone. You feel this major connection. And what I realized is that there's millions of people out there that have gone through something similar as I have. And at the end of the day, we're all going through like a human experience, which, I feel that each individual, they may have different starting hands, but we all go through life adversity. We go through major transitions. We'll have deaths when we don't expect them to occur. There'll be unfortunate events that will occur in our life. And it's understanding that at first, that hey, this is possible, like these things are going to happen to you. There's no doubt about it. That is what life's about, because it's not really explained to us at a young age or at all really, those types of things when they're saying life events, but you don't really have a good idea of what life events mean. We're so used to looking at other people's lives also as validation, especially on social media, like this is how things are
Yeah.
supposed to go. But when you understand that, hey, life is going to be tough, there's going to be some very down periods in your life. It at least gets you in that mindset of like, how am I going to handle those situations when that tough time does occur?
Right.
Who are going to be those friends that I'm going to rely on? So it's very important for us to have that mindset, develop a toolbox in our
Mm-hmm.
in our mind to be able to rely on when those really difficult and challenging periods of our life inevitably show up for ourselves.
Yeah, I agree. Again, I'm a little bit of a nerd when it comes to like research, but again, like the research out there says like we are one of the loneliest like societies or like time in the world. The score of loneliness is really, really high. And some people will say, oh, that's because everything's gone online. It's everybody sitting on their couches talking to like having these sort of like fake relationships. And while I agree to some extent, I also disagree to some extent as well, because I think if you can find the right community, the one that fits your vibe, that fits your values, that protects you and supports you in the way. I mean, I know I have been in some of those communities myself. Some connections have, like, we have taken them into messages and then we've taken them into phone calls. They're people I've never actually met in person, but I know that they are people that I call when there is problems. Like when I am like in a space and I need to like talk something out, those relationships have deepened. So it takes some effort, but it starts with that initial online community. If I had never entered that and said, hey, here I am, this is what I'm dealing with, and who else is there that would, has advice, I wouldn't have made those connections.
Yeah, it's kind of like you're finding your tribe, right? And
Yeah.
what's interesting is that when we grow up, we have our high school tribe, then we have a college tribe, and sometimes those mix, and then you might have your graduate school tribe, and then you have your cousins and such who might be tribes.
Right.
But when you start making this, transition, in life, or when you're making transitions in life and you're becoming more aware and you're awakening,
Yeah.
there's definitely some challenges that start coming up, for you. At least I noticed for myself, I had many challenges. One of those challenges were, once I aligned with my values, was understanding that not everybody around me has those same values,
Mm-hmm.
right? And
Mm-hmm.
so there can be some triggering that can occur. So, what are some things that our viewers and audience can maybe expect that can be very negative outcomes of us learning more about ourselves, I'd say?
Oh, gosh. Okay. So the negatives, I think sometimes it can be really confronting if we realize
Or
As
challenges.
we're, yeah, as we're, sorry, yeah, challenges, not negatives, but
Yep.
challenges. As we're doing some reflection, we can kind of realize like, oh gosh, the life I have is not the life that my like values would typically support. That can be really confronting. And a lot of times I get, when I have clients coming to me or potential ones and they're going, don't I do this work? A big fear that they have is, if I do this, I'm afraid it's going to blow up my life. Like my life that I have isn't particularly bad, but it's just something feels kind of off. And my fear is, if I start really doing some reflecting and connecting with myself, I'm gonna have to like start from scratch, and I don't want to throw everything in the bin, right? So that can be that's maybe one of the biggest challenges, is just that fear of finding out.
Right, right. And so how do we, and that's the thing, how do we get over that fear,
Yeah.
right? Like how do we, take that first step? And, what I want people to realize is that when we're transitioning, it's hard, it's tiring, it's
Yeah.
exhausting. When your body is so set in a certain way of thinking and being and feeling and surrounding yourself with, it's very hard for it to step out of its comfort zone. It requires your frontal cortex to work at a higher level than it has in a long time. And
Yeah.
that requires a lot of energy.
Yes, it
So,
does.
people, realize that when you're going through these transitions, it is baby steps. It is like, understanding that there's a little bit of a fog that might be going in your brain because oh my God, I'm doing something new. I don't know what the outcome is going to be. That's the biggest thing that I'm fearful of, is what's going to happen. How am I going to get income? Am I going to meet somebody else? You name it, right? Like
Yeah.
transitions, don't know what the outcome is, but it's understanding that it's baby steps. It's
Yes.
tiring. There is no speed that you need to be going at, or setting unrealistic expectations that will only disappoint you and cause you more suffering, that because you're not
Yeah.
meeting that transitional timeline.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I couldn't agree more. It is tiny, tiny steps. Again, the next, probably biggest challenge that my clients come across is they want to overcomplicate things. They want to make these big, giant transitions, or at least that's what they think their changes. That's what they think they have to make. But we start with little bitty things so that we can kind of test the water, take a step, see how that impacted the whole like ecosystem of your life, the wholeness of you. And then we take another step based on what happened with the first one. So, and it's a long game. It's more of a marathon. It's not a sprint. Tiny steps for sure.
And again, it is going to be scary, right? And it's kind of like when you're driving at nighttime, there's fog in front of you. It's going to feel uncomfortable,
Yeah.
but you can see some steps in front of you, right? And that's what's cool, but you can't see the whole picture yet. And it's important, I think, and what I've really learned, because I'm going through again, I'm going from being a physician to this company. I don't know how I'm going to make money, or when that's going to happen, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's a big fear in my head. But what I am doing is not future tripping, because we're looking at things that haven't even occurred at this moment. And right now I'm doing okay, like financially, right? And so it's able to get me to the next day. And so in this process, you grow. And now that I started this process last year, I'm looking back at how far I've come, in this major transition. And it's like in about, I'm releasing the app in January, and, the podcast is, going to be out in a few weeks. And, it's just a lot of exciting stuff that is happening as I envisioned it would happen. I just
Yeah.
thought it might have happened at a much faster pace, but when I try to do it at a faster pace, things crash and burn. So
Yeah.
I would highly recommend to our audience out there that do not set any expectations that are unrealistic about when this needs to happen, or when does the end of your transition need to occur. that will set you up for suffering and angst that you do not already, that you don't need, because you already have enough anxiety that's going through your body when you're going through a transition.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, life is like a one big transition. We were just talking about that before we started recording, about how life just keeps on lifing no matter what.
Yeah.
And it's just that there are certain points where the transitions are more uncomfortable or stressful, whatever the word might be, but we're always evolving. And so that if we could just keep in mind that it's just for life, like the transition is for life. Sometimes we have to put a little more effort into portions of our life or seasons of our life, and other times the transition is smooth and easy, and we can just kind of kick our feet up. But so yeah, 100% agree. No timeline. If you can help it, no timeline. I know that's not always possible. Sometimes you really do have to make, in my case, like we had to make a decision pretty quickly. But we also didn't just like jump and make a decision in 24 hours. We gave ourselves the few weeks that we had to make the decision. We gave ourselves that entire time. So yeah.
Yeah. And just realize that it's the journey in the transition that's really beautiful, right? When you really sit back and you reflect, every so often along your journey in that transition, look back, give yourself a pat on the back, because you'll realize how far you've come. It's just about keep going, surrender some control, because we're not going to know what the outcome is, but have faith that if it's rooted in true authenticity of who you are and what your values are and what your soul is telling you, it's going to turn out for its highest good. And you're going to feel so good at the end of that transition. It truly is something that's beautiful, despite all the angst that you have to go through to get to that ending. But nothing in life comes easy, and nothing good in life comes without a little bit of struggle. That's what builds our power, I feel.
Yeah, I love that. The more we are connected with ourselves and understand our core values and our character strengths, the more we can, I always say, like, I have a lot of faith in Dala tomorrow. Dala today is feeling a little stressed and uncertain, but I have a lot of faith in Dala tomorrow. And the more you are connected with those values and those character strengths, the more you can count on that future person.
As we're coming to the end of this podcast, if someone were going through a major transition, they're wanting to, say, go through a divorce, and it's very, very difficult. They're trying, leaving their family, they have kids. There's so much fighting that's kind of going on. Even struggle of should they leave, should they not leave. Walk me through just some steps that you would, or how you would guide them to initially take that first step and moving forward.
Yeah, the very first step I would suggest is that they do a core value assessment, just so that they, again, can get really connected with who they are and what it is about their life that is kind of rubbing against those core values. It gives you a logical way to think about things as well as an emotional way. We want to use both sides of our brains or our hearts or our souls, however you want to think about it. And I would also look at you as a whole person and see how each of those values are showing up in your life. There are a number of key parts of our person that makes us. That's our health, our finances, our relationships, our emotional wellness, spiritual environment, relationships, goes on and on, right? But I would look at then how are those values showing up in each one of those areas, because it just, as I said before, it just gives you an ability to look at your situation, kind of step back, put some distance between you and the emotions, and look at things a little bit logically as well. It'll just help you feel like you're making a more totally informed decision. And also kind of put you in that driver's seat. It can feel like you're just trying, like you just want things to be better. Sometimes that makes us reactive, so it just slows it down a little bit. And helps us look at all of the things that we need to look at when we're trying to make a big decisions or we're going through a big transition.
Yeah, I love that, because it's basically you're saying that we need to make very balanced decisions,
Yeah.
that because oftentimes our decisions, at least I can speak for myself, I made a lot of
Mhm.
emotional decisions, and
Yeah.
those are very reactive. But
Yeah.
then, weeks or months go down the line and I'm looking back and I'm like, wow, I really didn't handle that situation so well.
Yeah.
It left a lot of pain, with multiple people that were involved or whatever have you may be. And it could have been handled in a much more harmonious way, and I just didn't have that skill set at that time to be able to do such a thing. And I love that you're helping people break down their values and helping them make transitions with logistical side of things, coinciding with the emotional side and
Yeah.
helping that get aligned so that they're making a decision that makes sense for themselves.
Yeah. You're very human. That's a totally normal, very common experience. And yeah, I appreciate you being really vulnerable about that. But this is, I think at the end of the day, no, not I think, I know this is why I do what I do. I was so fortunate that I had done this work by total accident about 5 years before I actually had to put it into practice. And I just cannot understate or overstate how helpful it was when when my big transition came and it kind of hit me in the face. It was just incredibly invaluable.
Right. And just remember, there's power in vulnerability, not weakness, and it's important
Yeah.
for us to realize in transitions, we need to be connected. We need to reach out for help and we need to be doing that from an authentic foundation that we are building it within ourselves. Dela, is there a challenge that you have for our viewers today that maybe they could start or those that are going through transitions that they may be able to use to make that transition a little bit easier for themselves?
Yeah, I always we have been we've been talking about this without actually naming it throughout this whole podcast, and that is being mindful of ourselves. So I always like to challenge people to just take a week and each day sort of be very aware of what is bringing you a sense of joy or satisfaction, contentment, in sort of a different area of your life. So on day one, maybe it's your physical health. On day two, it's your mental wellness. On day three, it's your spiritual, so on and so forth, relationships. And just make a brief list of those things at the end of the day. So just sort of be checking in throughout the day as you're living your life how you normally would. That helps you key in on some things that are probably really connected to your core values. You'll start to see some things that are similar, that have kind of a theme. And then you can start to pour your energy into seeking those things out a little bit more each and every day as your life goes on. That's really kind of a nice, easy, gentle way to sort of ease into making decisions that will help you kind of through the transition.
Yeah, I love that. And I feel like a lot of my friends or family, they're saying, Nick, like, are you crazy for leaving behind of being a physician to doing what you're doing? But what I've realized is that when I did sit down and do this activity and understanding my values are, my number one value is that I love helping people and I love doing philanthropy. And so when I think about the term doctor, really it's just a label for I like to help heal people. And we can heal people in numerous ways, right? So I
Yeah.
feel like I'm more of like a healer, and that has helped me make that transition from being a physician to doing what I'm doing now, which is helping heal people with mentally, because I've
Yeah.
spent decade, 13 years helping people heal physically. And I realized during that assessment of myself that, hey, a lot of their physical ailments likely could be prevented if I was able to help them mentally get
Yeah.
stronger and be able to take more, empower themselves in their own physical journey. So, and that all starts with the mind. And so that's what you find out about, when you're getting these values solidified for yourself is that, it makes those transitions so much smoother and really aligns you with your soul's purpose, I feel.
Yeah.
Thank you guys for tuning into the AlignUs podcast, where we inspire a world of wellness and philanthropy. For more resources and to stay connected to AlignUs and the AlignUs app release, make sure you check out our website at www.alignusworld.com, and make sure you check out our social media pages, TikTok, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube with the handle at AlignUsWorld. And make sure you guys check out Dala's website at www.dhmentorship.com, and we'll have more resources in the captions below. Until we meet again, stay aligned, stay connected, and stay anchored into the power of unconditional love. Namaste.